What are these square icons doing? Give me slightly rounder squares. Perfect. God, what the hell is all this about? Why is everything so square and flat? Oh, that's better. You know, when you look back at a lot of the consoles from the 6th and 7th generation, a lot of them had some of the best user interfaces that you could look through. And I know that's such a weird complaint, especially since the games are a much more important reason why you get the console. But when you look back at consoles like the PS3 and the Wii and the Xbox 360, they try to get so much more out of your money by giving you user interface experiences that you couldn't get anywhere else. And it's not even nostalgia either. Hell, the only consoles I grew up were the GameCube, Wii, and Xbox 360. If you do want that nostalgic person speaking with me, however, I could just go, oh my god, these consoles were so fun. You had the Wii going, and then you had the Xbox 360 intro that goes like, and then the PS2 menu was awesome, it just went. But if you want the logical person speaking within me, what I can say was that the consoles of back then, like in the 6th and 7th generation, had a lot more of the menus prioritized than the games themselves. These generations had some of the most meticulously designed user interfaces over any other generation. I mean, hell, you're gonna be with this console for a while, they better make the experience fun, let alone having the games live most of the heavyweight. I can't even begin to count the amount of days I would just leave my Wii on idle and let the menu music play out in the background. It was kind of like a nice bit of soothing ambience while I was probably playing with Pokemon cards or Lego or something. The Xbox 360 I had never even got to touch a single online multiplayer game, and yet I still felt like I was part of a community because of how they designed the menus, even with my little avatar waving at me and everything. And yes, the same avatar I had tormented with when playing Doritos Crash Course. But now when I open up my Switch, I'm just kind of left blank. Is anybody even online? Are these games still even relevant now? Are people even playing their games? Is this console dead already? What happened? Well, that is what I'll be talking about in today's video. I want to take you all through a brief journey of the history of console menus and talk about how well designed the consoles of the past were made, while also discussing about the unfortunate turning points that led to the era of user interfaces that we are in now. I also want to give a brief disclaimer and say that these subjects are also opinion related, they're very subjective, and some of these are more or less about my opinions, like how I feel about the Wii and Switch menus, and if you enjoy the Switch menu UI as well as the Xbox and PlayStation 5 UIs as they are, more power to you. This isn't supposed to be against your opinions. This is supposed to be my opinions, how I feel about console menus now, and I also want to give a brief history as to all the legendary menus we had in the past. In the beginning, consoles didn't have menus. Either the console booted the game up immediately, or there would be a loading screen and then the game. Sometimes, like the PlayStation, there would be a BIOS menu, but not by much. But then the Lord above us stood over us and said, I don't know, give it a memory stick or something. Yeah, throughout the previous 5 generations of gaming consoles, there weren't really that much when it comes to menus. I mean, the earliest that I could think of would be the Famicom Disk System, but that was more or less just a startup. And the PlayStation would be one that would have some sort of BIOS screen, but most people would skip it because they would put a game in the system anyway. Actually, the PS1 had a lot going for it back in the day. Not only was it one of the first to have a proper startup screen and a bit of a BIOS menu, but it was also one of the first to adapt storage via memory cards. However, when we get to the 6th generation of consoles, those would be the ones home to proper, well, home menus. And of course, those consoles would be the original Xbox, the PlayStation 2, and the Nintendo GameCube. Each one of them actually had a pretty similar design language to one another. This was the early 2000s after all, so no frutiger aero in sight. And since the world was just hot off of Y2K, that meant a lot of these designs were embracing the future of technology, and a lot of albums coming out at this time were very electronic ironically advanced, including my favorite Michael Jackson album, Don't At Me. So because of that, a lot of game consoles back in the day used very dark and futuristic aesthetics. The Xbox was a very keen example of how this aesthetic worked. You boot up the console and you were immediately placed into a green science lab with a blob in the center, like it was a science experiment, which swiftly segues into the Xbox's logo. This laboratory would be reflected into the system's configuration menus, almost like you were kind of tinkering a beast, modifying this demon to your needs to be able to run your copy of Halo 2, Sonic Heroes, Drake and the 99 Dragons, just kidding. And to help amplify this effect that this system is some sort of powerful alien, they actually sampled sound effects from NASA's Apollo missions for the menus. But while the Xbox took the more scientific, futuristic approach, the PlayStation took a more minimalistic approach. You are greeted with this top-down, spacey view of what looked to be skyscrapers made out of blue blocks. And this piano synth hybrid gets slammed right into the speakers. And then, the PS2 logo. Fucking incredible. While I sadly didn't grow up with a PS2, I can definitely understand how incredible this menu was for a lot of people. It didn't feel like you were just playing a console. Rather, you were growing an economy, a futuristic one at that, with all these atoms and this whole blue atmosphere that they had going on for it. It also helps that the starting blue skyscraper blocks that you saw at the beginning, those actually grow as you have more games saved onto your console. But you weren't just growing an economy full of PlayStation 2 save files. You were also growing a mountainous collection of click DVDs. Yeah, this was also starting to turn around a time where consoles also wanted to be an entertainment center as well. And so because of that, a lot of consoles from back in the day were able to play both CDs and DVDs. Hell, the PS1 lets you play CDs, and some games like VibRibbon would have bonus material if you put a CD inside of it. The Xbox original could play DVDs, but you would need a media kit in order to be able to play it. The PS2 was one of the first to just overall have a built-in DVD player, and for a lot of people, this was actually a pretty affordable way to be able to play DVDs. But of course, there's another console that I need to mention that was also a major factor into this era's art style. Hell yeah. While the GameCube didn't sell as much as Nintendo and perhaps fans were hoping for, it still had a lot going for it, with it being one of the first consoles Nintendo ever put out to use discs, the fact it had storage capabilities, the new controller, the new possibilities with the hardware. So to help push further the concept of how powerful this cube was, we got this amazing menu. This menu takes the design ideas that the PlayStation 2 had and kind of pushed it into a more friendly and goofy kind of fashion. Hell, it also helps the fact that there was a secret start menu music whenever you press the Z button down. The GameCube's menu centers entirely around this translucent block, not only to look at your saves, which are also blocks, and also how much storage you have, which are also blocks, but there's also these floating blocks that float around and show things like the time in this cute little clock faction, also showing the time in text form, and also the date, and also showing other pieces of dialogue like press start. The GameCube was also given a similar ambient background music, and funnily enough, like I mentioned before with the Famicom Disk System, this song is actually an ambient rendition of the Famicom Disk System jingle. However, there would be another system that Nintendo would put out during this time, which actually has a completely different design language compared to all of the consoles that I just mentioned. I might be one of the first to actually say this, but the DS shares a pretty similar design language to that of the GameCube. Ironic because I just said it doesn't, but what I mean by is that it does have this blocky look to it as you go around these square menus navigating different parts of your DS. However, the way that it approaches, instead of it being dark and mystique, instead it's bright and kind of face forward. It was a lot more playful, being like, hey, look at this little handheld that we now have where you can play all these games, and also you could chat with people with PictoChat. Yeah, I know, it's mainly because the DS had very limited hardware capabilities compared to the frickin' GameCube and PS2, but still, it was a nice choice that Nintendo decided to make this a little bit more vibrant. Instead, it felt more like a little lobby, a pixelated lobby, with a ticking clock sound playing as it counts the time, while you either pick the DS download play, or pick the PictoChat, or pick a DS or Game Boy Advance game that you had loaded. And while I personally didn't have a PlayStation Portable, I will admit the menus are really nice. I really like this blue wavy background with all these little menu icons that are on screen. And this user interface that they would have would later be the UI of the next console of the next generation that we'll be talking about. By the time we reached the mid-2000s, the idea of a full-on console menu was finally starting to blossom. However, they would actually face similar development issues akin to smartphone and computer software UI around the same time. Since the world was moving into a more digitally controlled landscape, these developers had to find ways of communicating to you how to navigate or complete a task in the menus, like something as simple as inputting a response or changing the volume or moving files. These systems were also increasing in functionality too. Not only could these newer consoles, minus the Wii, play DVDs, but all of them were adding digital downloading and even more online functionality. And overall, they just really wanted you to spend more time on these systems because they had a lot more to do. It felt more community driven, or it felt like you were up to date on a lot of things. So I figured what better way to start the 7th generation than with the console made by a company that makes operating systems in the first place. The Microsoft Xbox 360. The 360's user interface was a significant upgrade from the original Xbox. Gone were the days of the Xbox green dashboard that we once grew up with, as the 360 introduced a sophisticated light green atmosphere with glossy icons and buttons. This user interface, which was nicknamed Blade, was the perfect way to communicate what this system was about for both old and newer Xbox players. It told the older Xbox players, hey, this console's got way more going on for it. And it tells the new ones, hey, this console's got Minecraft on it. However, much like the Windows operating system, the Xbox 360's dashboard had been given a lot of changes over the years. The one that I've been talking about here is the 2010 version. The one from 2005 looked a lot more like a filing cabinet, if I'm going to be honest. But yeah, I actually had a lot of fond memories about the Xbox 360, mainly just playing things like Minecraft Xbox 360 Edition, Portal 2, Rock Band, and I'll never forget watching a bunch of DVDs on it, mainly the SpongeBob SquarePants movie. Alright, that's enough about boxed X's. What's this thing about a third piss? The PS3 would continue the abstract wavy design of the PSP. And while I'm gonna be honest, it doesn't have the same level of personality as the PS2, it is still very sleek. It's honestly the perfect blend of personality and more bevelish designs that we had from back in the day, mixed with the more modern, flat aesthetics that we're gonna get to later. Also, even though these consoles are a year apart, one major thing the PS3 had a leg up from was the ability to play Blu-ray discs. And also me being a big Michael Jackson fan and Michael's music being on my Sony, I do want to mention this is a PS3 that exists and I think it's really funny. However, if there is one console menu that towers all of these other consoles in the 7th generation in terms of personality and aesthetics and user interface simplicity, that console would go to the Nintendo DS Lite. Just kidding, it had the same menu as the regular DS, and also the Wii. Would you like to know how important this console menu was for Nintendo? It was literally becoming an official project at Nintendo HQ that they had to prioritize on when the Nintendo Revolution was first in development. Actual meetings were called in order to discuss how the Wii's menu would be presented. Since Beta 64 already did an insane video about the history of the Wii's console menu, I don't want to dive too deep into it in order to not ruin the reason that that video exists. All I just have to say is, it looks amazing. The fact that they took this console and pushed the idea of it head first that people were going to put this in their living rooms and their console centers is honestly one of the most ingenious things ever. Literally the whole thing is like a television station, with each column in the menu being a channel that you click on that's related to whatever subject it's about, like the weather, photos, creating your own characters. I remember there was a point in time when my parents asked me if I wanted an Xbox 360, a PS3 or the Wii. And out of all those consoles, I chose the Wii because I loved the look of it. I loved the fact that you had a remote that was controlling cursors or whatever was on screen, that you could select things with it, and the whole console being basically a television station was fascinating to me. Oh, and also Mario, that was also a major thing. New Super But no, honestly, this is still one of my favorite consoles ever, and I'm so glad that it's still getting love and respect for many people to this day, thanks to things like Wheeling being able to let it go back onto the internet. It's so cool. I still remember the days where I would just have the Wii's menu playing in the background, and more recently, since I got it connected to HDMI, I've been playing it a lot more, and still have it playing in the background. In fact, I've actually been playing it in the background while I was editing this damn video. But now, to be serious, this console is still one of the most important in gaming history, and it's honestly no wonder why it's one of the top selling consoles of the 7th generation. Oh, and there's also the DSi. I don't want to go too deep into the handhelds because A, I grew up with Nintendo's handhelds, and B, I don't really know what else I could say about them other than they're really good, because some of these handhelds would match the same aesthetics as their console counterparts, but I do have to say the DSi was really neat. It was basically like a hybrid between the flat, blocky looks of the Nintendo DS with the beveled ambient charms of the Wii. And with the DSi having a camera on it, it was also perfect for those that wanted to express themselves. In fact, one of the coolest things about the DS's menu was being able to see photos that you had taken from the camera app pop up on the top of the screen. It's just that level of personal connection that just gets to you. The DSi was just honestly one of the most adorable consoles ever, but unfortunately, this would start to become the beginning of the end. Tragically, around the turn of the early 2010s, a lot of these design aesthetics would change. And the date? October 26, 2012. This was the day that Windows 8 was released to the public. Instead of the glossy, skeuomorphic attributes that made us love Windows 7 so much, instead, what we were all greeted to with was...
Wow, they have it square.
What the f***, Microsoft? How could you mess up something so simple as a user interface? This is an operating system, not a f***ing tablet! The following year, Apple would unveil version 7 of iOS, which replaced all of the classic icons that we began to love with a flat but gradient-infused icon pack. You would actually be shocked with how much negativity these new icons were given at the time. And with that, we would start to see a pretty dark trajectory for graphic design and user interfaces from this point on. Corporations would begin to start to cater to more flat and minimalistic looks for their logos and promotional material. And the 8th generation of consoles would be doomed thanks to this. The Xbox One would be the first console around during this era of graphic design, and... Oh God! It's just as bad as Windows 8! Why is it just so many squares? You can tell this screams the company that bought Mojang and Minecraft. Because everything is made out of blocks! Thankfully, other consoles would have a very similar approach to their previous one. The PS4 would take a similar look to that of the PS3, but it was also given a similar layer of flatness, albeit not as bad as the Xbox One, so I can at least give it that. These consoles would still go on to be pretty successful, don't get me wrong, because they had a lot going on for it, but it's clear these consoles are choosing to focus more on performance rather than personality. However, out of all the consoles that would come out during this 8th generation, we would get one final console that would keep the spirits alive of its peers. And that console was the Wii U. Yeah, I know, this was Nintendo's worst selling console, about 13 million units, it failed miserably, only lasted 5 years, but if I'm going to be honest, the Wii U had one of the most beautiful UIs you could ever imagine. It basically took the channel aesthetic of the Wii and pushed it a step further with this futuristic environment to it. Yeah, the icons were square, however, they were given this beautiful glossy border around it. In the background would be floating gray 3D icons. And on the opposite screen, depending on whether you switched it to the TV or the gamepad, would be this Me Plaza with some game icons around it, with the idea of this being a community of me's talking about whatever games are in that hub menu. And all of this was thanks to Miiverse, which is sadly not around, but was honestly a great way to introduce the idea of a social media platform that's only available on Nintendo consoles. First the Wii U, and then later, a handheld I'm going to get to in a second, the 3DS. I know it didn't really need to have any of the weird quirks and issues with it because of the gamepad existing, but still, asides that, this menu's fine. But yeah, this new 3D translucent era of Nintendo's UI design would actually appear first on the 3DS, which released a year prior, which in and of itself, now that I think about it, is like an evolution of the DSi. Since the DSi started this concept of square icons and these bevels surrounding it, the 3DS would push that a step further, especially given the idea that this is an entire console or handheld that had the ability to view 3D material with your eyes not needing any glasses. What also gave the 3DS's menu a leg up over the DSi and the Wii U and practically any of Nintendo's other consoles was that later on during the system's life, they added the ability to have console themes. Of course, you had the ability to change the color of it originally, but later on, they had the idea of full-on customized themes that were related to games or other different material from Nintendo. I actually do have my hands on the last 3DS model to come out, which was the new Nintendo 3DS XL, and in my opinion, I still think this console is still worthy even to this day, especially thanks to games like Brain Age. I don't want to dig too deep about it because I do want to make a separate video about this someday, but if I'm going to be honest, if you were to get a previous generation handheld, if you're wanting to do any sort of digital minimalism, go for the 3DS. I think it has so much more going for it, and I still think it's a worthy handheld to this day. However, much like many great things in life, all good things must come to an end. In March of 2017, the much anticipated Nintendo Switch would roll out. The Wii U would be immediately discontinued when the Switch rolled out, and a few years later, the 3DS would be discontinued. And not too long ago, both the Wii U and 3DS's eShops had shut down. So, what are we left with? Oh, Jesus fucking Christ. I know, the reason for this was because they wanted to limit the amount of storage needed to hold this UI in order to make room for the games themselves. I totally get it, but still, this is honestly one of the blandest, most generic, and awful user interfaces I had ever seen in my life. There's no ambience, there's no design personality, just a bunch of squares and circles, and that's it. You don't even get any background music on either the system or the eShop. I don't even know how the eShop could not even have music because it has to connect to the fucking internet. Could you not be able to play a single MP3 file or stream an audio bit through the website? But wait, of course, there's that one little fanfare that plays at the beginning when you first start up the console. For the first time after you unbox it, because after you open it and start using it, you're never gonna fucking see it again. The Switch's UI is so bare to the bone that the only thing that's given it some sort of remembrance to us is the icons that are in the menu. And you can't even arrange them with how you want them to. They're organized by last played game. I remember for a short while, you couldn't even organize them by whatever you wanted to. It took us a few years to get fucking folders, for God's sake. Actually, in a lot of ways, a lot of our complaints towards the Switch's UI being lackluster in customization is actually kind of ironic because the Wii and Wii U didn't even have any sort of customization other than arranging icons, but it was able to make up for it with how much personality the menus in the shops were given. Here, I mean, the Insane Asylum has a little bit more ambience. Hey, I got this ringing in my ears. It's nice, great music. I could sit here all day complaining about how bad this user interface is. But the more I think about it, do I really need to do this? Is there a reason to talk about these console menus and how important they were and talk about why they mean the most to us when all they really do is just get us from one point to another, like playing a game or accessing music or go online or whatever? Is there really a reason for us to talk this much? Is it just rose-tinted glasses? I guess, but honestly, it's a lot more than that. These menus were made at a time when companies actually cared about the experience the user was going to have. They're going to stick with these consoles for a while, and they're going to have so much time spent on them, at least make it very interesting for them. And it's thanks to that ideology that the consoles from back in the day, like the Wii and the PS3 or PS2 and the original Xbox and Xbox 360, are being held in high regards to a lot of people. The Xbox menu left such a legacy for the console that peripherals and merchandise would be made just on this menu alone. There are controllers out there and also Hallmark ornaments that have the original Xbox logo embedded into in some way or form. The Wii's UI has become so iconic, somebody made a launcher for your phone that turns it into a Wii phone, and it has an ongoing community making icons and starting banners for different apps. Hell, when Nintendo Music first rolled around, one of the first things that got added to it was the Wii's menu music and all of the channels. And PlayStation just rolled out a special console startup screen for the PS5 to celebrate PlayStation's 30th anniversary. So yeah, user interface is one of the most important things ever, and I wish a lot of these companies didn't take that for granted. And I'm gonna be honest, it makes me really happy that a lot of people are now starting to focus more on user interfaces, graphic design, and personality overall. I think it's a very important subject that I love from the bottom of my heart, and I'm so glad that we're getting more people discussing it as the years go on. But now, here's my final question. Do I really think I want to go back to any of these consoles compared to being on the Switch? Is it worth me going back and setting up my Wii, or recharging and playing with my 3DS, or going on or getting rid of my entire Switch all because I want the menus to be better? No. And I mean that in a few ways. A lot of people are going to prioritize more on the hardware than the user interfaces. Like Windows 10 and Windows 11 have some of the blamest user interfaces I had ever seen. Hell, I was so tired of the flatness of Windows 10 that was the reason I jumped into Windows 11. And I know that's weird of me to say that, but I'm one of the few that genuinely focuses more on user interfaces than anything else. And in fact, that's the reason why people still love Windows XP to this day, even though that thing's been dead for 10 years now. And what I also mean by no is that when it comes to the 3DS, there was a lot more simplicity to it. And with it still being supported by so many people, I am more than happy to get on it and play games, but I'm not going to have it be a daily driver, because I still want to be able to play like Mario Maker 2 and Mario Odyssey, Mario Wonder, Tears of the Kingdom. There's so many great games that the Switch had that just because I want to switch it out because of the menu, it's ridiculous. I do want the Switch to have a better menu, don't get me wrong. I think this really flat menu is lame. I know it's because of memory related things. I know they wanted to prioritize that. But still, I hope when the Switch's successor comes out that they give a better menu for these things, because my god, this is so lame, Nintendo. I wish you could just give us better options. But I have a feeling I don't have to worry about that too much. In November of 2020, Apple had rolled out the Big Sur update for macOS. Included were a bunch of new app icons that, while similar to the ones we already had before, were given these nice 3D embellishments skewed with a similar fork to that of skeuomorphism. This look would be given the title 𝘵𝘵𝘠𝘕𝑚, and a lot of software and operating systems have lately gravitated towards this new art style. Hell, it was actually the reason why I wanted to install Windows 11. I loved the look of this new kind of design, and I wanted to see more glossy textures, glass designs, and this overall new look to them that is so much more vibrant than what we had before with the flat minimalistic look. I got to see what the PS5 menu looked like thanks to my buddy Max, and while it's still a little flat compared to the PS4, it actually has some bits and quirks to it. Like when you go through some of the icons in the menu, there's this little whip effect that plays depending on which direction you moved. I know it doesn't really add much, but hey, it's a very nice touch. Switch. And whatever Nintendo decides to do with the next generation of the Switch, which is going to be revealed so very soon, sometime after this video comes out, whatever they do with it, I hope that it has a lot more personality than the Switch does. I'm afraid of living in a world where people aren't going to remember what it's like going through these icons and toying around with it, and instead is going to be focusing more on the games. And I know you buy a system for the games, I totally understand that, but to me, it's a lot more than that. I honestly consider consoles way more than that. It's not just gaming. It's a form of entertainment. And unfortunately, we're starting to even see less of that too. Tecmo had posted a video a while back showing that newer consoles can't even play CDs anymore. And while they don't need to, I understand that, it is tragic that we're losing a lot of this form of entertainment that you could also do on your system. And I wish we could do something about it. VSA Media Player was in discussion about being added to the Switch, but unfortunately, we hadn't seen anything from that yet. But aside that, what I'm trying to say is, I hope the consoles of the future would be given a lot more love and respect than the consoles of the 8th and a little bit of the 9th generation. In a world where people are losing more and more of their personality every day, and we're losing more interest from people, and we're losing more of what makes us ourselves, I think it's important that we get that touch of personality back. Did I just make an overly passionate video about buttons? Hey everybody, thank you so much for watching my video about console menus. It's a subject I wanted to talk about for a while, and I think it deserved the wait because it's a subject that needed a lot of time put into it. I also want to thank you to one of my fans for submitting a recording of the PS3 menu. Thanks to them, I was able to get footage of that, so that was really nice of them, and I'll put their information on the screen so you can go check them out. I do apologize if I sound a little bit more groggy than usual because it is currently winter time and I feel like I am on my deathbed. And also, it's because of all the time it took for me to record this because my throat is killing me at the moment. But with that said, I want to hear what you think. What are your thoughts on all of these consoles? What is your favorite console? And what is your favorite memories about it as well as the menus? Tell me in the comments. And if you have any other suggestions for what you want me to talk about next, and if you have anything else that you want to submit to me, you can submit them all via Blue Sky, Discord, or in the comment section below. And if you enjoyed this video, then be sure to hit the like button, and if you're new, the subscribe button, and the notification bell so that way you'll be notified whenever I upload a video. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.